Okay, welcome everyone to this episode of Scholars in Conversation. We are here at the University of Oulu and at the Center for Philosophical Studies of History. We are very, very pleased to welcome a distinguished guest, Professor Chris Lorenz from the Netherlands, also from Germany. As I understand, you're currently in...
Most of the time.
Bochum, is it?
In Germany, yeah, in the neighborhood of Bochum, but...
Right.
Yep.
Anyway, okay, let's begin. I'd like to ask with some background questions. We are always interested in how people entered the field of philosophy of history, how they became interested in philosophy of history. But let's go back to your education. What did you study? How did you become interested in philosophy of history? What are important influences on your thinking?
Okay, well, my road to the field of philosophy of history has been twisted, to say the least. I started with the study of economics, by the way. Yeah.
Ah.
But that didn't take long to find out that that was not my cup of tea. When I studied economics, actually economic history and history of law, I found the most interesting topics, and most of the time we were taught in other disciplines. So I stopped that within a year, and then I switched to studying sociology and anthropology.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I also did a bit of social psychology back then, but then I stuck to sociology and anthropology. And actually I did my master back then. The title was doctoral, but you can regard it as an equivalent of a master, although it took longer. And in this time I developed a clear interest in philosophy of social sciences, which were pretty much present back then, because we're talking now about the late 60s, early 70s, when a lot of was going on in Amsterdam, at least. And there was a general feeling, at least in the humanities, that we needed a thorough reflection on issues of what is science at all. Are there different types of sciences, etc. So studying sociology was half of your time studying philosophy of science, philosophy of social science. At the same time I also did statistical methods, etc., because that was part of the curriculum. And my real interest, as already had become clear during my time as an economist student, was history. But I never considered, actually, in the period before my gymnasium time, history was my major thing. I had a very good history teacher who later became professor in Leiden. So I had a good background in it, but my assumption was that sooner or later with history you would land in the classroom, and that was not my option. So actually I did not consider it seriously because of a misconception on my side.
So you are actually a social scientist to begin with. I think you're a rare case, because I don't in the context of philosophy of history, I don't know how many there are. There are many historians, educated historians.
No, that's correct. My basic training was as a social scientist. That's also why I had more, let's say, my ideas about social science went back on what I had been taught, of course, and I also did history, by the way, during my time as a sociologist, and in the social sciences my main interest became actually historical sociology. That was also so Weber. Norbert Elias was pretty present in Amsterdam because one of the Dutch sociology professors, Johan Goudsblom, discovered him and actually organized a new career for him.
So did you have important teachers or other thinkers that influenced you, or some other scholars, philosophers you idolized somehow, or you wanted to...
Idolized?
Well, that may be too much to say, but anyway.
I'm not much in the idolizing business, I must confess.
But who influenced you?
Well,
intellectually?
Yes. Well, actually, when we're talking about my time as a student, we had two American professors who came to Amsterdam. Amsterdam was, let's say, an attractive city to be in the early 70s, also for big names. And Alvin Gouldner, you may have heard of his name. He came to Amsterdam, and he had a very broad perspectives on social sciences, and he was of the opinion that the social sciences were in a crisis. He wrote a famous book, The Coming Crisis of Western Sociology, and that was the kind of stuff he was teaching. And another American professor that was important for me, not so much because of what he told himself, was Derek Phillips, who wrote the book Knowledge of What. But he had an open window to the recent philosophy of science debates. I also did as Nebenfach, I don't know how you call it in English. It's not your major, but your minor, philosophy. But Derek Phillips opened opened the way to this debate, the Popperkoen Lakatosh Feierabend stuff. Yeah. And I had read my bit of Popper back then, but not yet Koen, etc. And that was a formative event, let's say.
So there was acute interest in the social sciences, sociology, sciences in general. Was it also the time when history was considered as a social science, or people were trying to think about it as a social science?
This discussion was in the air,
right?
But there were the specializations of social and economic history, where this kind of conception of doing history was strong, but there was also a quite strong reaction to it.
Right.
So, but the question, how do we do sociology, how do we do anthropology, how do we do history, was in the air, was open, and was especially taken up by younger faculty members and by students. Because that is, at least in this story, about how philosophy of history or theory of history in Dutch there isn't much of a difference in these concepts. How that specialization came about and was discussed. The students played a major role.
Yeah. So the position of theory and philosophy of history has been particularly strong in the Netherlands, I think, and I think probably in a different setting, a different way in comparison to the analytical tradition. Well, we can easily name many influential thinkers in philosophy of history. Chris, you, and then Frank Ankersmith and Herman Paul from a younger generation, and I think the list could go on. So why is that? Why is it so strong there? Or has it been so strong? And is the approach different than, analytical philosophy to narrativism? That's, sometimes people write this kind of history. in Anglo-Saxon.
Yeah, well, the origin of philosophy of history and the institutionalization of this specialization is different, I think, in the Netherlands, or was different than in many other places. Because in the Netherlands, at the Dutch universities, it was very much tied up with the, let's say, progressive student movement, and who were inspired by the Frankfurt ideas of the Frankfurt School, and had this idea of critical social science, critical history. So it was actually they argued that doing social science could not, you could not stick to the questions. Well, what is the scientificity of this this practice? It was also the question: how does it function? How does it function in society? On whose side are we? These sides of questions, and the departments of history actually solved, you could say, solved the problem of students permanently asking all their teachers, all the faculty members, well, why are you doing what you're doing? By, let's say, delegating this question to one colleague, where these questions were the main course, so that they could continue to do whatever they like to do. So that is, I mean, I published an article in Dutch. I should maybe translate it in English. So the myth of the of the Dutch special way into the philosophy of history.
You should. That's an interesting topic.
Can be deconstructed. But the fact is that in many places, first in the bigger universities, students, critical students, left-wing students, kept asking, we need theory. That was not restricted to the Netherlands. This idea that only theory could save at least the humanities. I mean, a German historian has published a book, Die Lange Sommer der Theorie, and he says that this period, so between the 60s and the 90s, there was some idea in the air that we first needed to have good theory, and then everything good would follow after. And it's a bit an overstatement, but there was this sense that the problems that need to be solved were to be solved at a theoretical level, and that actually has led in the Dutch universities to appointments of specialists in theory, and they came. Well, you did also a bit of investigating in this. In this problem, I think, but most of the people who were appointed, the first generation theorists, to which I also belong, in Groningen, Ankersmit was got this position. He was very well qualified, being an historian, and I don't know if he has a philosophy degree, but well, doesn't matter. He did a lot of philosophy, so he was the guy. In Nijmegen, Jan van der Dussen, the Collingwood, the Collingwood man, at one of the Amsterdam universities, the UvA, that was not the one where I was working later on. They actually prevented the specialization of this specialization. That's interesting. But from the general point of view, that's maybe a sideway. I was appointed at the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, and the advertisement that I reacted to, the job I applied to, asked for a historical sociologist, and I could claim that much. But on the spot, it became clear that they actually were looking for somebody who could talk about philosophy of science and also philosophy of social science and could teach that. And so along this way, I ended up being a philosopher or theoretician of history, or whatever you like. But in this context, it may be relevant to tell you that I, in the end, did my PhD in philosophy. So
where was that?
In Amsterdam also.
It was Amsterdam.
I also have been an assistant at the philosophy department there for social philosophy at some point in time, and that was a lot of Habermas back then.
So you worked in Amsterdam and before that in Leiden, University of Leiden?
No. I first worked in Amsterdam, but that was then I had not finished my master yet at the UvA, at Department of Philosophy. Then I moved to Leiden, but in Leiden my first job was at the sociology department. I got there. There was a part of sociology that was actually a mix of philosophy and social science. It was called philosophical sociology. Yeah, you can say it's a remarkable, sort of sociology. But nevertheless, they were interested in problems of the foundations of the sciences. And since I had done my bit of Popperkoen, etc., and Feyerabend, I could tell them at least how the discussions were going on in this part of the university. And
Good. So one more question about this Sonderweg, which may be a myth. I don't know. Is there, in your mind, something that the sort of international community of philosophy of history could learn from the Dutch case, so to speak, in any way, institutionally? Otherwise, is there something? I guess we are looking for institutional entrenchment somehow. That
I think
if you have a theorist or something like in the history department, then that would be a remarkable change.
That is true. Well, that every history department should teach also courses in philosophy of history. That was laid down in the academisch statute. That is a kind of constitution for, at least back then. I mean, back then, what constituted sociology or the study of sociology or math or whatever, that was laid down at a central level. And there was a commission where after 1970, when there was a new law concerning the universities, also representatives of the students had taken a seat. So they could also discuss what they should be taught. And they have been pressing, together with younger faculty members, that philosophy of history should be part of the curriculum. And I'm very hesitant to say that you could learn something from the Dutch example because it was so conditioned by the time. By the political climate, by the how the forces, how the power was divided. So I think you could not repeat it. But the general lesson is, of course, that if you want to survive on the long run, that specializations that have an institutional foothold have a better chance of surviving than specializations that do not have that foothold. Because this inclusion of philosophy of history in the curriculum meant that there were jobs in the Netherlands for between 10 and 20 people who named themselves as such or were regarded as such. Yeah.
Right.
But I should also emphasize that this philosophy of history as an obligatory part of the curriculum was also connected to history of historiography. So it was often it was also taught as theory / historiography, which also meant that some people who didn't like philosophy that much had a backdoor to historiography. But generally, I think it worked. It worked fine because it actually made it clear that philosophical problems should be connected to historiographical problems in these courses. And in my experience from day one was that students of history only accepted, let's say, philosophical text about history or about explanation or whatever, when you could argue that discussions among historians presuppose these issues. So this you would not you would not be able to fill one classroom with history students back then with pure philosophical interest.
Right. Yeah, I think the time is different. There isn't maybe quite similar recognition of the theory element in historiography, which takes us nicely to your own thinking. We can dive a little deeper in your thoughts about philosophy of history and historiography, and is one of them that the historiography implies philosophical political elements? Is that fair to say? And if so, can you elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah, well, when I went deeper into the history of historiography, I more or less developed a special interest in German historiography. It was a very lively scene. You had all kinds of debates because of Germany's special history in the first half of the 20th century, let's say. And so there was a lively debate culture, and also the question, should historians also subscribe to specific values, democratic values, or is that a completely different problem? The relationship between, let's say, the humanities and the broader culture was problematized and thematized in these discussions, and it also meant that in several of these debates you could always sense what kind of political conceptions were in the background. So this, let's say, learning school for me of German historiography has sensitized me very much for these, let's say, political and evaluational elements in history writing, and also, let's say, in the analysis of philosophical analysis of history writing, because I mean, back then big names as William Dray, etc., also had a clear idea that the way in which historians explain the past is clearly related to values that they subscribe to.
So that there are political elements in historiography is not really good or bad. It's just the case that that's how it goes.
So I more or less came to the conclusion in due time that it would be best to also discuss these dimensions of doing history, and not try to sweep them under the carpet, which was usually done, because when historians discuss history with each other, and then, well, the argument or the criticism that is political is, of course, that's the end of the road, and the discussion stops. And I think that, that's not a good idea.
Perhaps this relates to the idea of comparativity. So that element of comparison is very important in when we are judging and trying to find a good account of historiography. Can you explain why do we need comparison and comparativity? Why not to get to the truth straight away?
Straight away.
Someone might think that why not?
Right on to the truth.
Yeah,
that would be nice. Yeah, well. There's this nice quote of Paul Feyerabend in the Gaines Method that has been with me ever since. Prejudices are found by contrast, not by analysis. Something like that, maybe. And that is an experience I very much had. Actually, it is also, you could also say that the person who has read one book about a topic has read no book, because what is peculiar for a specific way of representing the past and explaining it only becomes visible or tangible when you can compare it to other ways of analyzing a period. And that was also one of the reasons that German history was so important in my upbringing and in my writing. Because the reason was that in Germany, you did not have one book about the causes of the First World War, but there were on every topic that was debated, there were fairly distinct versions of the past, which made it clear that no history book is a direct road to the historical truth, and that the historical representation is in a one-to-one relationship with the past it is representing. That's, well, of course, when you have been through philosophy of science courses, etc., and you are beyond positivism, etc., and you have had your bit of Popper and Lakatos, then you know that also at the descriptive level, there are all kinds of conceptual elements, interpretive elements, theoretical elements. I mean, that is what I brought from philosophy of science to philosophy of history in my case. And that, I mean, in the time I have been discussing this kind of topics with Frank Ankersmit, and that was in the 70s and the early 80s. We had several discussions in journals, and these discussions, some of them have been reproduced in the later international discussion. But one problem I had with Frank's narrativism was his thesis that, I don't have to tell you, this distinction between the level of descriptive statements, which were non-problematical in his view, and then the level of the interpretative level of the narrative substances, which later became representations, where you have a lot of theoretical problems, or at least there's nothing given. And I have always argued against him that this very idea that there is a rock bottom at the descriptive level is not correct, and that you can prove it also in his historiographical debate. But he has remained pretty unconvinced over the years.
Would it be fair to say that this idea entails that there is no peer description, but any description takes place in a language or in a framework or something like that?
Yes, that has been my position, informed by philosophy of science debates and well, a bit of neo-Kantianism, and I found it remarkable that Anker Smit, who is a very intelligent philosopher, stuck to his guns in this respect. I mean, also in the later discussions with Samito and well, you also questioned this distinction. He is unconvinced. Although I found one quote. Maybe you have quoted him somewhere. That there's one line in one. It was many texts in which he suddenly admits that at the descriptive level there is also this well, issue of interpretation and concept. So, but yes, we are not here for Anker Smit exegesis.
Yeah, good. I was going to ask you about your relation or ideas about narrativism, which you partially already answered. But this is something more to say. There's of course Hayden White and maybe the whole narrativist way of thinking school. You don't agree with them. You think something goes wrong with narrativism. Is that right?
Well, there are many varieties of narrativism, and of course in the Netherlands, Anker Smit was the big name, as he later on became one of the big names internationally. But Hayden White also entered the scene, and my problem with these versions of narrativism, and that may have to do with my background as a social scientist, is that at first they make a watertight distinction between social sciences and history. And two, they, well, in the case of Hayden White, of course, White did not address the historians immediately. He was in literature department, but he made a total distinction between narrative forms and what they were, well, whether they were related with fictional universes or let's say the historical universe. He dropped the truth claim of narratives, and I have always argued also in my discussions with Frank that if you drop the truth claim for historical narratives, then you have a problem, because that is completely at odds with presuppositions of doing history of I think 99% of the historians, and they might be wrong, but I mean I don't think they are.
Did you compare in one of your papers in 1980s the narrativism to logical positivism in an inverse, like upside down way of something like that?
Exactly. Yeah. Inverted positivism.
Right.
Yeah. That is this article about a metaphorical turn.
Yeah.
Narrativism, positivism, and the metaphorical turn. Yes.
Yeah.
And I try or I argued there that both in Anker Smit's philosophy and in Hayden White's writings, I a bit hesitant to call it philosophy, but in his writings about history is this inversion of positivistic ideas. As to the factual level, also in White writings, there are some indications or pronouncements where he suggests that at the level of stating the facts, making assertions. There's no theoretical or interpretive problem, and the complement of this idea is the idea that at the level of narrative, so at the synthetic level, there's complete freedom to narrativize the facts as you want. And that may be true for fictional universes, but my thesis has always been that's not true for the historical universe. Yeah.
Yes, good.
And I was glad to see that this line of arguing and thinking was picked up by you, for instance.
Good. I want to go back just a little to the idea of comparison. And I asked this question the other day. So if we compare, we have several accounts, and we use comparisons. In comparison with respect to what? What are we looking for? What are the values that do we want to maximize something, or what's the principle of comparison?
Yeah, that's a difficult question because you cannot compare the narratives, if we're talking about narratives, to the past itself, as we know, for obvious reasons. So you can only compare them to each other. And then, as to the criteria that come in there, but I mean, it's pretty hard work to show that at the level of concrete controversies. You, of course, have, let's say, epistemological values which you try to put in place, like coherence, originality, explanatory scope, etc. And I think there's a lot of work to be done in in further analysis of historical texts, controversies along these lines. But maybe there's a reason that this has not been done very much as yet.
Yeah, should be more. Should be done more. At some point, you have identified yourself as an internal realist. That's in the mode of Putnam, maybe.
That was my leading light back then. Yeah.
Study still. Does it still stand?
The idea, the idea that the only way in which we can talk about reality is, of course, in terms of assertions about reality, and we never hit the rock bottom of reality with our assertions. Or when we hit them, we cannot prove them that they hit the bottom. So the basic idea of internal realism that I took over from Putnam is that doing science, doing history, we presuppose a reality, but it's always a reality under description.
Yeah,
that's
because all together with that idea. Indeed.
Yeah,
indeed.
Which also implies that every description is actually a claim, an assertion, and must be warranted some way. And that is let's say, the name of the game. Doing history, doing science. So it's actually, a name for presuppositions you can't prove, but which are leading and maybe explaining why scientists and historians do what they do. I mean, I think the very idea of investigation, of research, presupposes some kind of some form of realism. I mean, I know that Paul, in the meantime, has developed. He says realism or the facts without realism. Well, I don't want to make things more complicated than they are, but I think that most historians have some kind of realistic intuitions. And again, many have argued, I mean, that these intuitions or these metaphysical theories don't do work in actual research practice. But I would say they are leading the very idea of research.
Yes.
Because otherwise the question is, what are you trying to investigate?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. It's a good question always. Then other influences, maybe more recent, is the John Searle's speech act theory. You have used that as well?
Who?
John Searle.
Searle. Yeah. Another leading light. Actually,
applied to historiography.
Yeah. Well, actually, of course, speech act theory was already around for some time.
Yeah.
But it occurred to me that speech act theory played, at least at the time when I was reading Searle, did not play any role in philosophy of history. That there was some kind of linguistic turn in philosophy of history, both with Ankersmit and with White and a couple of others, but they restricted, let's say, the linguistic element to the level of narrative. There, they put more. Well, there they were more linguistic. Had gone further in the linguistic turn than I thought for history was good. But they, nor Ankersmit nor White ever was interested in the fact that historical reality as such, or social reality as such, because that's is, let's say, linguistically constituted in the form of speech act. That every institution is, in fact, a form or a result of speech act. And I found that an interesting observation, which has consequences, and which I will try to clarify in the future.
Yeah. So out of personal interest, do you actually talk about historiography as argumentative speech act? Because this is also my view in the post-narrativism, that it's an argumentative practice, and every book can be considered as a performative act to say something, to enter the academic discourse and put something forward in the argumentative context. Is that?
Yes, that's very much
okay.
along the lines. Thinking, yeah, that's let's say arguing this view on the past, or this is the best assertable. That's the, well, I mean, we are not very generous when it comes to handing out truth label, because it's so complicated to give the warrants for that. But I think that truth is in the game in this way. Every historian who writes a book or article or whatever basically says this is, I think, the best one can say about the topic.
Okay, and then a little bit moving on and sort of using the discussion and the topics we have been going through so far, considering historiography and your view that it entails philosophy or philosophical elements. Philosophy is there already in historiography. So what's the role of philosopher of history? Or is this a stupid way to think about it?
Clarify in what ways history writing is based on presuppositions that are not clarified in the process.
Yeah.
Yeah, so making historian, enlightening historians, but the philosophical presuppositions they are putting into practice without necessarily knowing it and without necessarily discussing it. So
yeah. So it's basic analytical work in a way. I mean, this is an unfair comparison, but also logical positivism thought that philosophers, mainly what they do is they analyze language and what we say, what can be meaningfully said and such matters. So.
Yeah, I don't think the philosopher is in the position to prescribe scientists or historians or whichever discipline you're talking about, what they should do, because I mean, in this sense, I think, Kuhn made clear that disciplines are practices which are rule-based, etc., and they don't need to wait for philosophers to come by to give their legitimation to these practices. Yeah.
Okay, I move on to the. I don't have a very well formulated question, but you have also what about German historical culture and German historikers strike for decades, I guess. And could you tell more about it? Just very open question. What have you researched and what have you done in that area?
Well, it's not only the historical strike I have been analyzing. I also been analyzing the Goldhagen debates, and in general, I mean, this text, this chapter I used for the seminar is full of the debates about the Third Reich and the Holocaust. So it's not. It's not just the historical strike, but I found the historical strike and discussions like this interesting to analyze, because it is a discussion, or it was a discussion mainly between historians, not only about historians, because there were also others involved, Habermas, for instance. Well, it's difficult to locate Habermas in any discipline, but nevertheless he was also instrumental in bringing about the historical strike. I think it was important because it concerns the public use of history, and it was these big public debates in German history or history writing clarify what is at stake in this type of history writing, and these public debates also clarify, let's say, the political and evaluational elements of historical interpretations, and in a sense they magnify these dimensions. They are closer to the surface, I would say, of the texts than in most Fachdebatten in Deutsch. So when the colleagues are just among each other. And well, I think it's important for historians, but probably also for philosophers of history, to show and to argue that these interpretations of the past matter also in a political sense. And in the German case, well, always has to do with, of course, the Nazi Vergangenheit in Germany. These themes were more frequent debated than in most other cultures. Although in the meantime, I mean, you just have to look at France or the Netherlands. In the meantime, most of the other Western European states that were Nazi occupied, you also had debates about the involvement of the elites in these occupying regimes, the role of collaboration, etc. And since the 90s, we also have the public debates concerning the colonial legacies and the colonial wars that have become public debates. And I think are opportunities for both historians, but also for analysts of history, like philosophers of history, to clarify what is at stake and that history matters, I would say. And the fact that these debates are so get so much publicity and are around so long, basically means that historians are in the front seat of public opinion under the circumstances. And I'm not pleading for let's say, organizing a quarrel between historians just to get public attention or so, but I mean, when there is public attention, I think historians and also philosophers of history could use it. By intervening,
Yeah, this is very, very topical, and I think also you've been critic of national history, national historiographies, and I guess the whole issue that what is the basic unit around which we should write history? Is it a nation? If it's a nation, then what are the potential, perhaps, political consequences then?
Yeah, I have been working in a project for comparative national histories for almost 10 years. Stefan Berger, many others. What we basically did was clarifying how national histories have been written in Europe. That was the spatial context, and that was a very useful experience for most of us, I think. Most of the historians and historiographers know about one national traditions. The standard history of Finland or history of the Netherlands is a history of a national unit. I mean, and the interesting features of these national units only become visible when you compare them among each other. And what we found out in this project, and others have also found it out along other ways, is that these national narratives, well, many of them are very similar. There's, one could say, a narrative template of national histories, of, well, specific origins, a blossoming at some time, then the bad guys came from outside, maybe some betrayal inside, oppression of the people, the nation, and then a successful national struggle which ended in autonomy. This narrative template is pretty much around everywhere. You have varieties, of course, because you have people with, you have countries with more or less uninterrupted long histories, like British history, French history, Spanish history, but most European countries, especially when you move to the east, have more complicated stories with periods in which they were not autonomous, etc. And yeah, our findings, and also my finding was that you actually only see these particular characteristics of national histories when you compare them among each other. I mean, I've been in Finland before. I was so lucky being invited a couple of times, also by colleagues who do national history, and so I learned my bit also about Finnish history. And I mean, only because I also know other national histories, it occurred to me pretty soon that it was a pretty Finnish peculiarity to argue that there was no Second World War here. There was a war of continuation.
In Finland.
In Finland, yes. The very term Second World War was hard to use. Maybe the situation has changed in the meantime.
But it's somewhere in the background. Yeah, we will talk about the Winter War and then the continuation war.
Yeah, and that is let's say a Finnish peculiarity, and other countries have their peculiarity. But so I think and that's what we have been talking about before. That you can see the special characteristics of any object, nations, states, narratives, only in a comparative framework.
Yes. Okay, there are of course national identities, and I think we are observing some problematical aspects in the current political climate of that now.
You say that again.
But you, if I'm mistaken, you still take a positive, approving attitude towards historical or collective identity as a theoretical notion, or is it a critical point of view rather, or a positive point of view, or approving somehow?
Well, because I have been dealing with national histories so long, of course, the phenomenon or the concept of collective identity was very much on my horizon. And with the rise of populism, the problematic sides of collective identities are there for everybody to see, I would almost say, although if you're a populist, of course, it's only good news. What I've been trying to do, and I recently published an article on the whole debate about collective identities, is to argue or to show that collective identities are presupposed not only by historians, but also by, let's say, communities, all kinds of communities, from the local level to the national level. And this observation runs counter to pleas in the discussion about collective identities to do away with the concept. I mean, there have been quite a few discussions about collective identity and identity politics since the 80s and 90s, you can say. It depends on where you are on the map. But within the community of the humanities, postmodernism also is important in this context, because there are quite a few postmodern thinkers who say identity is not a feasible concept at all. It not only holds for collective identity, but also for personal identity. So let's do away with it. Let's stop talking about identity. And in the historical discussion, actually, Frederick Cooper and Rogers Brubaker's have published a couple of texts around 2000 in which they argued that collective identity is a concept we should get rid of because it's dangerous. It's always essentializing identities. It's reifying identities. It's creating the suggestion that, this is basically an argument that was also used by Popper in his critique of totalitarianism, that there are supra-individual entities around that do things. and that limit the freedom of individuals to act as they want. Well, in Popper's critique of historicism, you know, it goes. He argues that historicists posit laws, and you cannot posit laws in history because then you say that the actors are not free to do what's what. We don't have to go that way. But actually, these publications by especially Frederick Cooper and Rogers Brubaker's, and in the German context, Lutz Niethammer, a very bright and very learned historian, wrote such a thick brick, Collectieve Identiteit, in which he basically tried to write a conceptual history of this concept and made mincemeat of it in the end, and also said this is dangerous and we should get rid of it. And in my article, I argue that these attempts to get rid of the concept of collective identity are under-argued and are counterproductive.
Right. Yes.
Especially now we are in a situation in which there are political forces who mobilize collective identity in a completely unreflective way. Yeah. And you cannot just say it's all nonsense, or well, you can, of course, you should deconstruct their concept or so, but you cannot say, that's my argument, collective identity as such does no work for us, and we should get rid of it.
Right. It's not possible at the moment.
It's not possible. No. And in this article, I actually try to provide the arguments why the very attempt to destroy the concept of collective identity is counterproductive. Yeah.
So, of course, the identity politics is very prominent these days, and so maybe it's may lead to polarization, or in fact leads often to polarization. But maybe we could develop tools, I don't know what kind of tools, but deal with this issue, since we have this notion of collective identity or identity. So I don't know what the tools would be, but maybe that would be a fruitful way to...
No, I mean, I'm on one line with Appia, the philosopher. What's his name? Appia. He's written a lot. He has written a lot of about collective identity, etc. And he's a philosopher in the American context. And his argument directed at the critics of identity politics. And let's first say that a lot of nonsense is produced under this label, identity politics, but it's not all nonsense. He argued, show me one form of politics which does not contain an identity dimension. And he also argues, and I also argued in this article along this line, every kind of politics implies a kind of identity politics, and it's used as a label to discredit the opponent. I mean, if you frame the word identity politics, I mean, you already can. If you say I'm in favor of identity politics, you can go home and because you're not taken seriously. And this is a discursive situation, which I think is counterproductive. It produces no insights and is politically dangerous. Is a heavy term, but risky at least.
Thank you. So I have one big substantial question. Unfortunately, we don't have much time to discuss it, but so far we haven't covered the issue of time and temporality, which you have also written about. And just crossed my mind when you talked about the social sciences, the prominence of social sciences earlier, and theory in the 1970s. It crossed my mind that, was it the case that the time and temporality aspect of time and temporality was a bit missing in those discussions? And to put it the other way around, is it the particularity of historiography in comparison to social sciences that it deals with time and temporality? Elaborate in any way you like.
This is a this is a very simplified picture, I would say, and I would say anybody who's spent a bit longer studying social sciences would, as anybody who studies a bit of longer time on history, sees that there are a lot of varieties. And therefore I have always criticized the idea that all of the social sciences are blind to the temporal dimension. And I can say, because I studied a couple of sociologists who are very much aware of the temporal dimension. I mean, I named Norbert Elias in the beginning, and he has written a small booklet about time. I did my bit of Marx in my younger days, and I would say in Marxian theory construction, time always plays a role. And you can always ask what kind of time, and we can talk about time layers and pluritemporality, etc. That's all fine with me. But historians have traditionally claimed to be the specialist in time dimensions. Well, in an implicit way, you can say, I mean, the traditional picture of doing history is, of course, people who are describing and explaining the past, and that's always a temporal issue. There's always, the object is always at a temporal distance from the historian. So in that sense, history is always dealing with time. But I would also say that any social theorizing, and you see that also Bourdieu has a bit of temporality in his ideas, and I would say I did my bit of Weber also. I mean, Weber's whole theorizing also presupposes time, and in his case, it's not chronological time; it's developmental time. I mean, all this, every social scientist who tries to say something sensible about development or change or several stages in a process comes back to time. So I don't think you can make at least empirical analysis of social reality without taking the temporal dimension seriously, and also as to theorizing. Well, you always have this distinction between diachrony and synchrony. Theorizing about synchronical processes is also a possibility. So I'm not categorically saying that social scientists always should include time in their... But you can say that those who don't do it free and who try to say something sensible about synchronic events or processes are freezing time. So that's also a way of dealing with time.
Sure. Okay, thank you. And I think we can go to the set of my final 3 questions. And so very briefly, what's the future of philosophy of history? Where is it going?
Where does it go? Well,
where should it go?
Well, it should continue to exist. That would be my first remark, and I hope that I adduced some reasons why I think that this is the case. Where it should go? Well, I think philosophers of history should mind which other disciplines should be attentive of what we are doing. I think, although philosophy of history should be located or is located in philosophy departments, or as in the Netherlands in history departments, the audience in principle is a bigger audience, also for the reasons I've adduced, because public history is important, and we should reach out, I think, by intervening in discussions which are dealing with problems that we could clarify. In general, I mean, I'm very hesitant to say, well, we should, or historians, philosophers of history should be more attentive to epistemology or methodology, or maybe we should do some more metaphysics of time or so. We'll see where that's going. I don't know. I don't have strong opinions about it. But where I do have a strong opinion about is that the connection between philosophy of history and the analysis of history writing, and not only history writing, other ways of doing history. I mean, because I belong to the older guys. Usually I'm talking about history writing, but there are so many other ways of doing history nowadays. History as it is in the digital media. Well, we have the musea, etc. Well, what is called historical culture? I think you mentioned the concept. I did not elaborate on that, but I think we should watch in what forms the interest in history is taking, and that we should also turn these forms, other than writings, into objects of analysis.
Yes, very good. So from your experience, can you give any lessons for the world, for the troubled world? In other words, what can philosophy of history maybe contribute to our troubled times, in politically, historically? Anything you can...
Oops. So the question is whether philosophers of history, as philosophers of history, have some kind of privilege.
Yeah, if you have a long experience in philosophy and theory of history, are there any lessons to, or could we engage with the debates and discussions in some particular way? What would be the angle to contribute, if anything?
Well, as I suggested earlier, I think philosophers of history would do well and also legitimize their angle and their expertise when they would be part of public discussions in which problems of the past, and there are enough discussions concerning the problems of the past to show or to elucidate those discussions and entangle them, and maybe flesh out dilemmas. I mean, you have dilemmas, for instance, to treat something as an historical object or as an object of the law. I mean, there's a difference between legal time and historical time. I mean, just pointing out these differences, well, that's not everything. I mean, that's not a total package we have to offer. But I think it is a distinction that is not made by most people, at least not so explicitly. So there is a task, shedding light where a light is needed and where we can provide it. And as I said, there are so many debates nowadays going on about the past, usually the problematic past, legacies of colonialism, legacies of slavery, reparation issues. Those are all topics in which I think philosophers of history could participate and do their best to make this a better place.
Very good. Okay, it's time for the final question. So what are you working on yourself currently, or what will you be working in the near future, maybe in the far future?
Well, there are a couple of projects,
yes,
and I must say the past has taught me one lesson, that is that I'm not very good at planning. But what is, well, on my desk, the last article I finished is this one on collective identity. It's now online for everybody who is interested. I also just finished an article on the notion of objectivity in German history between Ranke and now. And I try to address the question why there has been no discussion about value freedom among German historians. I mean, the Werturteilsstrijd, as it was named, is located originally in sociology, and you had similar debates among political scientists and all kinds of also in the Erziehungswissenschaft, so educational science, etc. But among historians, no such discussion has taken place, although the Weberian value freedom postulate is known in this tribe, and on a regular basis people refer to it. But has not been such a discussion, and well, I'm trying to give an explanation why that has been the case. Those are two recent projects. One project I will be working on is on the booklet Why Historians Disagree. That's is an element meant for the series that Daniel Wolf is editing for Cambridge University Press. And then there is a longer time book project, Constructing the Past, of which I have taken this chapter for the seminar this week. I find it hard to put a deadline on that project, but I hope to get many things done the coming year.
Great. That's many things in the Owen and the work.
Oh yes, and then I have not even thought about my continuing interest in new public management and in neoliberalism in higher education. That's something we did not talk about.
Right.
But I can tell you...
You can still talk about it briefly if you like.
Yeah,
we don't have a lot of time, but it's true we overlooked it. But it's an interesting topic.
And if you look at my list of publications, you can see that I think almost 1/3 of my publications is dealing with these issues. And for many people, that may be a very strange hobby of mine. Yeah. But it's connected to this idea, which I did not develop. I mean, I took over in the 70s of, let's say, critical history, critical social science. Doing and studying these kind of humanities is not just, let's say, an armchair activity for me. It's also reflecting on the conditions of the production of this type of knowledge. And as all these disciplines are located in universities, you are dealing with universities and what mechanisms, what policies are determining how our universities look like, and what possibilities we have to write whatever we like. And this is where the public management comes in, and neoliberalism, that this attempt to argue that the universities are just another firm and we have to sell our products in the market, etc. I don't know how strong. I think Finland has not seen the.
I think it has, unfortunately. I'm afraid you're talking about this kind of managerial attitude.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's
managing like a company.
Yeah,
like a,
exactly. And evaluating our products.
Yeah.
Of course, they must be quantified first, and then you can
Yeah.
evaluate them, and you can make ranking lists, etc.
Look as if in one team producing something, everything has a monetary value.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I have been writing about these topics because what can be said legitimately in the university is conditioned by those who determine how our universities look like and how they are financed. So that's
another. I wish we could go a little longer, but it's another interesting topic about the future. Whether that hopefully can change, and to what?
Yeah.
To change to what perhaps we had earlier. This kind of Bildung idea. Is that still possible, or when? In what time scale that might be possible?
Yeah, and. Maybe the question whether we should do something in order to push it in this direction or that direction. Of course, that's maybe a very depressing theme, but
still, I need to ask: what could we do? What should we do for the situation? Of course, you can write to the newspapers and you can voice your opinion in the meetings. But
yeah, well, I mean. In this domain, I mean, as far as I have been some kind of public academic or public intellectual or whatever, it has been because of my publications on new public management, etc. Because that that was a topic, not so much anymore, in which you can intervene and argue why this. Model, this capitalistic firm model, and this market thinking in the domain of higher education and scientific research is really a monster, and it's a thing to get rid of.
It can hurt the science, knowledge production.
Yes, it does hurt the science already. Many people with talent already have left the university, or that didn't even enter the university. I don't say the university is the only place where you can live a decent life or live a good life, not at all. But I mean, there are people who said, well, academic career is not for me because I've seen how it functions.
Okay, I'd like to thank Professor Lorenz, Chris, for this conversation. It's been a pleasure. Also for staying with us here at the University of Oulu and at the center. And thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me and having this interview.
Okay, thank you everyone, and stay tuned for further discussions and conversations.